What is up, guys? Welcome back to Vevor Customs, and in today's video we are going to be reviewing this Vevor Rotary Welding setup. We also have an American-made welding rotary table that we're going to be kind of comparing and contrasting to what's on the market here with this Chinese unit, and kind of go into a little bit more detail with that. So let's jump right into it. Before we jump into the review on this rotary welding setup, I want to just spend some time and give a little bit of a disclaimer out there. So for the past 4 or 5 years on my channel, I've pretty much had 0 sponsorships, 0 free products, anything of that nature. And the reason for that is I really hate channels that go in and basically turn into an infomercial. I'm doing this because I love doing these videos and sharing the journey. And as our business grows, our videos will change. And Vevor has been emailing me for over 2 years, as well as several hundred other companies trying to get me to review their product. And the answer has always been the same: definitely not, or they just get ignored. And the reason for that is I like high quality products. And usually Chinese products are not something that I prefer. Now, I'm not saying I don't have any Chinese products. I have an iPhone. It's made in China. It's a great product, and there are several great quality products made in China. However, by and large, a lot of what you see in China compared to what you see in America, Canada, Japan, Germany, usually the Chinese market is cheaper, and generally that's what their kind of selling point is. So I just want to put all of that out there in full transparency. Now, in regards to the Vevor welding table or welding setup that we're going to be reviewing, I actually was looking at purchasing a high quality Pro Arc unit, the same unit that Curtis uses in his videos, and I thought, you know what, that would be a great investment. I did some digging and I found out that that rotary welding setup is actually made in Taiwan, and it's several $1,000s and actually hard to get a hold of here in the US. You have to go through a distributor, get a quote. It's a whole pain in the butt, and even still, it's not made in the US or in Canada or Australia or any of these higher cost manufacturing regions, which I thought it would be. So that led me down a path of looking at some of the Chinese options to see what they had to offer. And that's where we came across this Vevor unit. So I actually looked at this, I thought about it, and thought, you know what, for 800 bucks, it's probably a good risk as long as it does do what it says it's gonna do. And to be honest, it's not that complex of a design, and I thought, how hard can it be to screw up? Basically, it's a gearbox, some wheels, and a motor, and a basic VFD. So I was willing to give it a try. Now, at that same time, Vevor was emailing me. They come in waves, about every month or 2 months they send me an email, and they emailed me the same day I had this in my cart to purchase on my own, and they wanted to send me something. I don't remember what it was. But they always have at the end of the email, hey, if you don't want this product, but you have another product you want, let us know. And so I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to email them, see if they'd be willing to send me one of these. And at first they didn't want to because it's outside of their budget, but they made a kind of allowance and said, hey, we'll send it to you. So that's kind of the backstory. Typically I wouldn't do something like that, but I would have bought this anyway. And I think it could be a decent product. Unfortunately, we need to do a tight time frame between getting it and doing a review. So we aren't going to be able to give you a long-term review, but we'll give you our first impressions. We'll put it to use, and I'll give you my honest feedback. And that's what I try to do on this channel, is just tell you flat out, is it good, is it bad, is it in between, regardless of what anyone cares or thinks. I just give you my honest feedback. And I know that there is value in hearing that. So we're going to put this thing through its paces and let you know what I think about it. Taking a look at the unit, you can see it's pretty basic construction, and I want to address just one last kind of thing before we jump in. I did think about building one of these. You guys know that I overbuild everything and I really over-engineer it. I already was pricing out the gearbox, the motor, the VFD, because it's really not that hard to build. I was going to get the parts laser cut out and pre-bent, and at the end of the day, that is the benefit of some of this Chinese stuff, is the cost has gotten so low on some of this stuff that it really makes building some of this stuff a really hard ask if you're going to do it just to sort of make something better. Now in this case, this is a pretty basic machine, so for the most part, aside from the electronics, if I would have built this, I don't know that it would have turned out, you know, that much better, maybe 20% better using a little higher quality wheels and a little bit of different design. But for the most part, it's getting really hard these days to justify certain projects to go ahead and build them, because in this case, I would have probably still spent $600 or $700 in raw materials. I would have had a great video series, but besides that, I would have lost, you know, maybe a week or two of on and off time building something like this, and I'm not sure that I would have even come that much ahead. Obviously, I would have had a better VFD and better motor, but at the end of the day, if something like this can solve the problem, it comes here not only free of charge, but quickly. I don't have to do any work, and it does what it says it's going to do. It just frankly makes sense to go this route than to try to build something like this, and also possibly try to buy something like this that's 3 or 4 times the cost, that is pretty much identical except for a couple other changes in electronics. So I just want to put that out there. I almost forgot. We have an American rotary table here right now that I want to use sort of as a litmus test to kind of compare this against. And the backstory is I actually picked both of these up on the same day. I did have 0 rotary welding capabilities in my shop, and I knew that that was a weak spot. And so I really wanted the Vevor setup for doing hydraulic rods, pipes, tubes, big things like that. But also, that's really not set up well for doing this type of work on a vertical or adjusting rotary table. They're very similar in what they do. They both spin the work at a slow speed, but each one kind of has what they're better at, so to speak. So this is going to be great for welding flanges or anything like that that I can put on the table. Most of the time, it's going to be in the vertical position, and then we're doing socket welds or something like that. So I'm interested to see how these work in comparison to one another. I picked this up for about 600 bucks. These are about 1,700 to $2,000 brand new, and they are made here in the U.S. in Wisconsin. Now this machine is actually 20 years old, but it was used for one job, so I was told, and I do believe it. And it was pretty much parked in the corner. Now the benefit between something like this and something like this is service. So a lot of these companies, Vevor as an example, are coming in here. Who were they 5 years ago? No one knew, no one heard of them. And then sort of overnight in the last several years, they're popular, right? That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's one business model. This is an entirely different business model. The company who makes these has been around for 20 plus years, and not only have they been in business, but they've serviced and sold similar products. So as soon as I was looking at buying this unit, what I did was I called this company and gave them the serial number because it was in the Facebook post, and they were able to tell me that the new unit that they sell is only mildly different. All the parts were available for this unit. They sent me an email with the drawings. So the serviceability of this unit far exceeds what is available here. Because if and when we have an issue with the electronics, if I had that within a 3-month period, for example, or a year period, I'm sure they would send me a new unit to keep me happy. But then beyond that, it's probably on me. It's not like I can call these guys up. They're emailing me from China. So the support is sort of limited towards a short window right after you bought it, keep the guys happy. So if you're aware of that, when you're buying or getting Chinese product, fine. But it's just something to keep in mind when you compare something high quality made in the US to something that is budget friendly made overseas. And what I would like to do is do some demos on this as well as some demos on this and sort of compare. But just initially looking at the construction of both of them, it is quite surprising how decent of a job the Chinese unit does construction-wise in comparison to the American-made unit. Now, the American-made unit is using 1/4-inch plate, and it has a 200-pound capacity, whereas we're using 3/16-inch plate on the Chinese unit, and it has like a 2,500-pound capacity. So, you know, it's definitely not apples to apples. These are not the same style of product or type, but they are in the same family, which is rotary welding. So I would say that looking at this, the build quality is great, but it's not super high, far exceeding the build quality of the Chinese one, which is a little bit interesting. I think it just speaks to the fact that the Chinese are really dialing in their process. Now we're talking about the mechanical aspect. The actual electronic aspect, that's an entirely different question. Now this is a much simpler design, which is probably a good thing. I have a hard time believing that in 20 years this will be working, but I know that in 20 years this will still be working, not only because it's a simpler design, but it's probably sourced with better quality materials. And also if this fails, we can call and get a switch and we're back in business, which we cannot do with this. So again, these are two different products in two different kind of families, but they are a similar concept, and I really just brought this into the video as a comparison because I did get these at the same day and they do similar things, and I wanted to look at how this was designed and how this was designed and sort of figure out how much better was this really designed compared to this. And it is, but it's not as big of a difference as you would initially expect. We got a long piece of hydraulic rod chucked up in the lathe. We're just doing this as a demo, so we're gonna get this in cleaned up and chamfered, and then we'll work on, we have a small piece here that we cut off. We'll do the same, so that way we can get these tacked together and then we'll get these welded out. All right, we got this hydraulic rod set up and we're getting ready to give this rotary welding positioner a test. So a couple things. First thing is we have our ground clamp set up. We just took like a piece of wire, wrapped it around, and then clamped it to the bench. And then we have our ground lead over there, clamped to the bench. So that's good. I was gonna make the brass basically rotating ground that Curtis has with my own flare. But I realized that you can get a American-made Lenco rotating 500 amp ground clamp for like 150 bucks. So there's no point in me trying to custom make one when I can just buy one. So that's what we'll do, but until then, this should work fine. As far as our gun, we're running spray transfer. I know we had a lot of comments about the settings that I was running before. We are still learning, but as of right now, it looks like we're running about 29 volts. And I don't know, maybe somewhere in the 300-ish inches per minute. It's hard to tell. I'm at about 5 between 0 and 10. So we'll see. I did some test runs on some plate, and we are running CO2, 100% carbon dioxide. So that should be good there. So we should be all set. We'll give this guy a run, and we'll see how she welds. Come in here and scale this. All right, we got this guy welded out. This is not a customer job. We're just doing this for the demo. And if I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna learn on scrap. So we learned a couple things. So first off, towards the end, I started melting these wheels. Probably a rookie mistake, but hey, you learn, you figure out as you go. The weldment was too close to the wheels. And again, I think that's a little bit of a design thing. Not against Vevor, but on these bigger rollers, most of what you're going to be doing is bigger stuff. And so when you're welding a really small pipe, it heats up pretty quick, and I probably was just too close to the wheels. So that's not a knock on the product, that's on me. So in the future, you know, these wheels are fine. They just have a little bit of a, an indentation here. So it may be fine, or if I need to, I can retrue these up in the lathe. Probably wouldn't be a bad thing to do anyway, because this is a little bit rough. So that's just something I need to learn. The ground clamp ended out working fine, and if you notice, we have some sandpaper over here. I was having problems initially with this part slipping and not really gripping with the resistance from this ground clamp. Now there isn't really a lot of force required to hold this in place, but with this ground clamp dragging, it just was kind of intermittently slipping, so I added that sandpaper and it wasn't an issue. When we have our rotating ground clamp, we may not even need that, but again, this part is like on the small side for what these are designed for, so with more weight on these rollers, it probably wouldn't be an issue, both with the burning and with the slipping. As far as this stand goes, it's pretty cheap. We knew it was cheap when we unboxed it. It's really hard to design something like this high quality. There's a lot of moving parts, at least cost effectively. So that pretty much garbage. I figured out towards the end I was actually getting better results hand welding. I was a little worried that I'm kind of shaky, and so that's why I wanted to see if I could use this. But at the end of the day, I realized the best use of this is just a place for me to rest my hand while I'm MIG welding. That way I can sort of get the angle I want really easily, and I don't have to kind of mess around with moving this around. So this, honestly, for what it is, it's not bad, but with all these joints, it would be really expensive to engineer this a better quality, and instead of like $50 add-on, it would probably be like a $1,000 add-on. So I'm not too upset about that, just kind of letting you know. As far as the weld goes, I'll kind of show how we ended out. I need to work on my stop and starts. This is the first time I've ever rotary welded at all, ever. But overall, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. If this is the first and it's only going to get better from here, I'm pretty happy. We had a minimal amount of spatter. Most of that was just me varying my distance from the weld. But overall, some of these runs are extremely smooth. Obviously, we didn't grind this. So once I get dialed in, you can see how you could weld something like this and have it be extremely factory looking and obviously get really good penetration and not only look good, work good. And so in that respect, the rollers did a really, really good job. Again, I mentioned about the foot pedal. It'd be nice to have a bigger area, but I guess going small is nice because it's lightweight and convenient. You can easily grab it and put it over here on the bench and actuate it with your hand. The actuation is fine. There's just not a lot of travel, and so for me, wearing huge boots, it'd be nice if I had something a little bit more positive, because when I have hearing protection in and I got big boots and it's just sometimes I was like, am I sure I'm closing it? So but that's minor. Aside from that, the electrical cabinet worked great. Again, not a lot of complexity, but it worked. And overall, I'm happy with this. I think it will work perfectly fine. These wheels honestly don't need to be that true, and overall it will do what its intended purpose is. So as long as the electronics hold up, this is probably a great type of product to get made Chinese, because it's pretty simple and pretty hard to screw up. And overall, I am happy with the results here, and I know as we move on, as long as this keeps working as it is, I'm pretty happy with it. And it's going to allow us to do some really, really nice welding. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the other rotary table and kind of talk about that one. We got our second rotary table set up here, and we're just going to do a demo. Pretty self-explanatory. Initial impressions are pretty good. A couple issues that I've seen already. First off, clamping work down to this design, definitely a little bit more difficult. You can't do a C-clamp on the edge because it's going to hit the base. There is T-slots, but they would need to be really small, low-profile T-slot nuts so that they can clear this basically quarter-inch gap. And even so, you don't want them sticking up too far, because if you're welding like here, you don't want nuts spinning around hitting your welding gun. So I did the magnets here. That'll work out perfect. But there is some room to sort of figure that out. Now I know basically these are kind of designed to use with them chucks. They're like a quick release chuck, and so that would solve that problem. I have thought about throwing a chuck on here. That would also kind of help, but this only has a 200-pound capacity in this direction and 100 the other way. I'm mostly going to be using it on small parts, but if I throw a 10 or 12-inch chuck up here, I'm going to be pretty much at capacity. So unless I can find like a super light, large chuck, I don't know how I'm going to address that yet. But for the most part, other than that, the clamping mechanism in the back is just a bolt. Works great if you have a ground clamp, but I use the magnets. So I just got a C-clamp on it. Other than that, so far, seems pretty good. We have the speed. We're going to get it dialed in. And yeah, let's get welding, see how she turns out. My welding helmet's falling apart, but that is a pretty darn good weld. Looks like we got some porosity there, so maybe need to, yeah, my nozzle's pretty dirty. First try, that's excellent. Pretty much perfect. I could not be happier with that. The porosity I don't care about. Wow, that was awesome. We got the feeds and speeds dialed in a little bit quicker. Obviously, we're gonna fine tune it. But what I do like about this is it's easier for me to see in this position compared to doing it the other way when it wraps back around, so I can get a cleaner start and stop. So let's mess with the settings. Let me see if I can heat it up. And speed's good. Let me clean up my nozzle and we'll take another pass. Well guys, that rotary table turned out really nice, gave us some great results just getting our feet wet with the MIG welder. Overall, with some more practice and time, I think I can really dial in the settings and basically get some perfect rotary welds. I'm really excited to try some TIG welding and do some really nice socket welds as well using that. And overall, I am happy with that old machine. It's really proving itself as we've been using it even in this short time. As you've seen, we did break our welding helmet of 7 years. I did a couple jobs last year where some heat sort of just distorted the mask and really kind of melted this piece here in the back. So I need to come and actually replace this helmet. I'm looking at getting another Elite, either an Optrel or a 3M speed glass. So I'd be curious to know in the comments which one of those you guys prefer. I know a lot of you guys are welders, and I've been hearing kind of pros and cons of all three of those units, so I'd be curious to get your thoughts. In regards to the Vevor rotary welding setup, I really did like that unit, and in comparison to this, it's actually pretty decent. They both obviously are not apples to apples comparison, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to include this just to kind of give sort of a comparator, and overall I'm happy with the Vevor unit, and we will see how it performs on some upcoming jobs. We do have a job specifically for that, and that's why I bought it, so you'll be seeing a video on that. And overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we will see you in the next one.